the clash of steel, the roar of warriors, and the strategy of kings. Welcome to the world of medieval warfare. From the thunderous charge of cavalry to the disciplined ranks of foot soldiers, today we uncover the untold stories of how battles were fought and won in the Middle Ages. We often imagine these battles as chaotic, brutal affairs, and they certainly were. But underneath the surface of all that violence was a cold, brutal logic, a terrifying calculus of life and death. Today we dig into that reality, we unearth the secrets of the battlefield, and try to understand the experience of those who lived and died by the sword. Before the first arrow was loosed, before the first sword clashed against shield, the seeds of victory or defeat were already being sown. Medieval battles were not just chaotic skirmishes, they were often, particularly as we get later into the period, highly structured events dictated by strategy, terrain, and the weapons available. Imagine for a moment you are a king, a prince, a general in this time. Your scouts return with news, the enemy is approaching. Do you meet them on the open field? Do you attempt to lure them into a trap? Do you make a stand behind stone walls and wait for siege? These are not simple questions. Lives hang in the balance, thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. Your own life, the fate of your kingdom, all of it hinges on the choices you make in these moments. And what about logistics? Armies, even in the ancient world, traveled on their stomachs, supplying a force, keeping it fed, keeping it equipped. This was a monumental undertaking, a logistical nightmare. Morale, too, was a weapon, maybe the most important one. A well-fed, well-supplied army, confident in its leaders, is a force to be reckoned with. A starving, demoralized force is likely to break and run at the first sign of trouble. The infantry, the backbone of any medieval army. These were the men who formed the shield walls, who met the enemy charge head-on, who stood and fought, often to the death. Now when we think of medieval weapons, we often think of the glamorous stuff, the shining knights, the clashing cavalry. But the infantry, they were the bedrock, the foundation upon which victory was built, and their tools, while maybe not as glamorous, were no less deadly. The spear, for instance, simple, effective, deadly. For centuries, the spear in its various forms was the king of the battlefield. Cheap to produce, easy to use, and devastatingly effective in the hands of a trained soldier. And then there's the sword, the quintessential medieval weapon, the symbol of knighthood, of chivalry. But forget the romantic notions. The sword was a brutal instrument of war, used for thrusting, for slashing, for hacking. And don't underestimate the psychological impact of a weapon like that, the sheer terror it must have inspired. But the infantryman's arsenal wasn't limited to just spears and swords. Axes, maces, warhammers, brutal, crushing weapons designed to break bones, to cave in skulls, to turn armor against its wearer. These were not weapons for the faint of heart. These were tools of war, designed for one purpose and one purpose only, to kill or disable the enemy. Now, before the armies clashed in close combat, another kind of warfare took place. A deadly dance between adversaries separated by open ground. The age of gunpowder might have been centuries away, but make no mistake, medieval armies could rain down death from afar. The bow and arrow, for instance, a weapon as old as warfare itself, found its true calling on the medieval battlefield. The English longbow, in particular, was a weapon of terrifying power and accuracy. Imagine the terror of an enemy army marching towards a hail of these arrows, each one capable of piercing armor, of bringing down a man, a horse, with a single shot. And then there were crossbows. Wielded by specialized soldiers, these mechanical marvels could fire bolts with incredible force, punching through shields, armor, even stone walls. But ranged warfare wasn't limited to just bows and arrows. Siege engines, massive constructions of wood and iron, could hurl projectiles weighing hundreds of pounds across incredible distances. Rocks, burning pitch, even the bodies of dead animals. Anything to break the enemy's morale, to soften them up for the inevitable assault. Chapter 4, Cavalry, the hammer blow. If the infantry were the anvil of a medieval army, the cavalry were the hammer. Heavy cavalry, knights in shining armor, charging into battle on horseback, it's an image that defines medieval warfare. And for good reason. A well-timed cavalry charge, a thundering wall of horseflesh and steel, could break enemy lines, shatter their formations, and send them fleeing in terror. But the role of cavalry in medieval warfare was complex, constantly evolving. They could be shock troops, yes, but also scouts, raiders, a rapid reaction force used to exploit breakthroughs or reinforce crumbling defenses. And the knights themselves, these weren't just mindless thugs on horseback. They trained from childhood, honing their skills in the saddle, mastering the use of lance, sword, and shield. They were the elite warriors of their day, the product of years of dedicated training, and on the battlefield, they were a force to be reckoned with. Chapter 5, Walls of Stone. The Siege Warfare. Not all battles were fought on open fields. In fact, some of the most brutal, most protracted conflicts of the medieval period took place around castles and fortified cities. Siege warfare was a different beast altogether, a grim, attritional struggle where patience and engineering often mattered more than brute force. Imagine yourself a defender in a besieged castle. The enemy surrounds you, cuts off your supply lines, and bombards you day and night with missiles from catapults, trebuchets, and other infernal devices. Food runs low, water becomes scarce, and the constant fear of attack wears down your resolve. For the attacker, siege warfare was a logistical nightmare. Keeping an army supplied in the field was hard enough. Doing so while besieging a well-fortified castle was a monumental undertaking. And then there was the ever-present threat of disease, which could rip through a besieging army faster than any sword. Chapter 6. Beyond brute force. Tactics and strategy. Weapons alone did not win wars. Tactics did. Commanders used a range of strategies from ambushes to feigned retreats to outsmart their enemies. Take the Battle of Hastings in 1066, for example. William the Conqueror, outnumbered by the English forces under Harold Godwinson, used a cunning combination of feigned retreats and cavalry charges to break the English lines and secure victory. Or consider the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, where Henry V of England, facing a much larger French army, used the terrain to his advantage, funneling the French knights into a narrow killing zone where they were cut down by English longbowmen. These battles, and countless others like them, highlight the importance of strategy, of using every advantage, every trick in the book to secure victory. Chapter 7. Global Warfare, Beyond the European Battlefield. Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about European warfare, but it's important to remember that medieval warfare wasn't confined to one continent. From the samurai of feudal Japan to the Mongol hordes that swept across Asia, different cultures developed their own unique approaches to warfare. The Mongols, for example, were masters of mobility and logistics, able to maintain vast armies in the field for years on end. Their cavalry was legendary, their archers deadly accurate, and their commanders were masters of strategy. In Japan, the samurai, with their strict code of honor and martial prowess, engaged in centuries of internecine warfare, honing their skills in swordsmanship and military strategy. And in the Americas, the Aztecs and Incas built vast empires defended by armies of thousands, armed with clubs, spears, and bows, and protected by armor made from quilted cotton. Outro, Echoes of Steel. If you enjoyed this journey into medieval warfare, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more untold stories of history. The medieval period, for all its violence and brutality, was also a time of incredible innovation in warfare. It was a time when the fate of nations was often decided on the battlefield, where kings and commoners alike lived and died by the sword. Until next time, may your blade stay sharp and your armor strong.